This is Rhea, and this is Just the Who of Us, where we talk about a range of topics, including life events, current events, spirituality, entertainment, family relationships, as well as answering listener questions and more. You are the lucky first guest of my Pride Theme Month.
Happy to be representing.
So I know a little bit about you, but just to kind of give my listeners some insight into who you are and the significance of you being here with us, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, my name's Morgan, and I am originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. I grew up in a really conservative Christian family. I was homeschooled, so spent a lot of time at home. And I went to college in Minnesota at a small Bible school. I was very kind of involved in the church scene for that portion of my life. I always knew from a really young age that I wasn't going to be straight, um, which was a lot for me to try to work through as a kid, especially growing up in a religious environment.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that, when I was younger, a lot of people would just say, oh, she's a tomboy. She just likes to play with, rescue heroes and cars and all that kind of stuff because she's a
She'll grow out
tomboy.
of it.
She'll
Yeah.
grow out of it. It's just a phase, and then as I got older, it turned into like, well, are you sure that you don't want to wear a dress to your big dance? Are you sure that you don't want to wear, a nice low cut outfit for that date you're going on, like that type of thing. I always knew though in my heart that I was going to be different than what my family had hoped, which I think was a hard acceptance. So anyway, so I came out to my family first and then the world next, probably 4, almost 5 years ago now.
Okay.
And currently I'm in a relationship. My partner of 3 years, Nicole, we met in Savannah when I moved down here, and it'll be 3 years for us on June 10th.
Okay. Nice.
Which is which
So,
is actually June 21st. Sorry. Don't let her know. Set up.
I'll cut that
June
part out. I won't tell her.
21st. It's okay.
So,
She knows I'm forgetful.
same. I my now husband and I swear for like the first 5 years, if you asked me when like how long have been together, I would have
Yeah,
said like 6 7 years for 5 years straight. I don't know. I mean, I've
right.
known him for so long, but I get it. It's like
Yeah.
I got a lot of other stuff going on to remember like dates and such.
Right. And like for us, we went on our first date on June 21st, but we officially said that we were dating on July 10th. So I think I don't know if we ever have like a regular anniversary. I think we just kind of celebrate it every year whenever we feel like it.
Right. Some wiggle
Which has
room.
worked out well. So
And is that the ADHD? Is that like
yeah.
so that's one thing that interested me about having you on too, was because we have a few things in common.
Mhm.
The ADHD as well. I was like, oh, someone who, she's gonna get me. And let me ask you this.
Right.
This is kind of like a side note.
Sure.
My husband and I were just having this conversation recently. Do you have or had ever had problems with brushing your teeth? I know it's random, but I have a reason for asking this.
I I guess it depends on what you mean by problem. I would say that I am really specific about brushing my teeth.
Really?
I like when I go to brush my teeth, I am very, very careful to get like all the way back and all the way. So I probably brush my teeth longer than most people, maybe too, because I spend so much time. So I would say that I'm very aware of my mouth when I brush my teeth,
Right,
if that
right.
makes sense.
Yeah, no. I
Maybe the
was
parts of it that I wouldn't otherwise think about.
no, I have this same kind of routine. And if it's like if I can't follow the routine, then I don't want to do it, which I know
Right.
sounds gross, but it's like it's a thing. And
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way now that you've mentioned it. I wet the toothbrush and then I knock it on the counter 3 times to get the excess water off, and then I put the toothpaste on. So I get what you're saying. Like it has
yeah,
to be very specific.
yeah. And I was explaining to him too that like, okay, for some people, because someone else brought this to my attention recently, and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, it
Yeah.
makes so much sense. Like it's a struggle because I was like, having ADHD, I have to go into the bathroom. I have to stand there and just stand there and do something. And like, that's difficult. It's difficult for me. And even though I'm a grown up,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Yeah, like I got to just stand there and do this.
I have
And
that same issue.
I'm glad to
Yeah.
know that there are others who get it.
Yeah,
Like I do it, but it's like I have
sure.
to do something to kind of keep myself busy, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, because it's
I
not like
usually walk around while I brush my teeth, and I've done it since I was a kid. I'll like
yeah.
start in the bedroom and I'll walk to the bedroom and then I'll walk to the kitchen and then by the time I get back
Yeah.
to the bathroom, usually I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I have to do it like in the same order. Like I brush
Yeah,
in the same order. So I have the like electric toothbrush, and I was telling him like if I didn't have that, I don't know that I could brush my teeth because
right.
like I have to stand here and then I have to like go
Right, the
like
whole time.
right,
Yeah.
like just do the
It's
same thing the whole
uncomfortable.
time. That's so weird.
Yeah, I think like with the age of TikTok and everything, I think that it's maybe the first time that people all across the globe are starting to relate to each other when it comes to like
Yeah.
symptoms of their mental, I don't want to say mental illness, but mental abnormality, I
Yeah.
guess. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's funny, like you know, I'm 26 now, and I only in the last maybe 2 years have felt like there are other people out there who feel the way that I do because I'm aware of them now. It's easier to access people.
Yeah. And it is. It's sorry. Um, that's true though. It's like you can go on the internet and you can find people just like how we met. You can
Right.
find people who you wouldn't meet just going to the store or whatever, going to, in a classroom or whatever in any kind of like in-person setting.
Yeah.
And you can meet people that you can connect to, that you can relate to and things like that. And although especially if you're a teenager or a kid, it can be dangerous
Sure.
exchanging information and meeting strangers. They can get your information, they can find you and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So obviously you have to be very careful. Even as adults we have to be careful, but it is a cool thing. It's a cool thing to be able to connect with people that you wouldn't otherwise be able to connect with on the internet in
Yeah,
a
and I
safe
think
way.
yeah, I think it helps you form, at least in my experience, it helps you form kind of deeper relationships with those people too, because you're already connecting over something that you both have in
Yeah.
common. Like you already have that out of the way, so you can just
Yes.
dive into like that next level of friendship
Right.
with people, which is kind of cool. So,
So with that being said, let's chat a little bit about what you do.
oh
So I
yeah.
know that you're in marketing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I am in content marketing. The title I give myself is a content creator because I think that just covers a really broad aspect of a lot of different things that I like to do.
Yeah.
I have done this type of work on the side for 7 years. I got started when I
Wow.
was in college, which is actually kind of a cool story. Um, my whole family is really musical, and so growing up, I would like be involved in church worship teams and stuff like that. And so when I went to college, I went to a really small school called Bethany Global University, and I started in a work what do you call it, where you basically like work towards your tuition,
Okay. I know what you're talking about.
like a work study program.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I started in their music program, and on the side, I had a little personal blog that I ran where I just blogged about anything and everything that came to mind. I was like 17.
Okay.
So one day I got pulled out of that internship program though and pulled to the marketing program because their marketing director at the school had found that blog and he loved my style of writing and everything so much that he pulled me out of the other internship.
Oh,
Which was the
nice.
first time in my life. Yeah, it was the first time in my life I ever really had heard of marketing or knew anything about it or what it entailed. And so anyway, so I've done it off and on for a while. Last year in March, I launched my current business full time, or not full time, but as a part time thing. I just recently transitioned to full time.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so I do a lot of social media management. I write SEO blogs for companies. Mostly I work with pet related companies and in the healthcare industry, but I like to do a little bit of everything. It keeps it interesting.
That is interesting. And it's not because when I, when you said content creator, my mind went to like TikTok or something like that
Yeah,
because I feel like that's what people think, but
right.
that's not the only content that one can create professionally.
Right. Yeah, which I think is a lot of people, I think, have to have that realization or do have that realization after we have a conversation. I'm like, your blogs are still content. So yeah, that's just
True.
kind of the only thing I've come up with until now to
Yeah.
describe what but I'm sure it will evolve just like everything does.
But that's the good thing about, so do you work for a company or you have your own company?
I have my own company. So
Okay.
I work for myself as
Nice.
a freelancer. So I don't have an LLC yet.
Okay.
Um, my tax lady's been telling me to hold off, so I am. But yeah, right now it's just me. So I do all the work and everything else.
Yeah, same. I for the both of my businesses, I do all my own stuff, and
Yeah.
sometimes I would like to hire somebody though and just like not have to worry about certain things, but it's
Yeah.
part of the small business startup process. I kind of do want to learn this stuff for myself too at the same
Right.
time. Like I want to know how to do all the aspects, and then if I get someone, I bring them on, I know what they're doing as well, if that makes sense.
Right. I feel the same way. I definitely think down the line I'd like to bring somebody else on just to do a little, some of the more like technical or organizational type stuff that maybe I don't have to do all the time. That might be nice.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I get what you're meaning. I've always been a lifelong learner too, so I think it's always great to learn everything that you can.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband and I were talking not too long ago about, because we have young adult kids and teenagers and a kid, and we're just talking about there's so much opportunity. Sometimes I feel like it probably seems to young adults and teenagers like, I don't know what to do. Like there's so much going on. I don't know what I can do. But there's so much opportunity in creating your own business, even if it's something, starting out something small, doing doing work for other people,
Right.
even, or if it's, you know, something you're putting out there yourself, like you can literally go online and start your own business, like
Yeah.
there's so much opportunity. Um, how so your relationship with your parents, did your parents teach you about finances and business and things like that?
I would say that I learned a little bit of what not to do from my
Okay.
parents as far
Okay.
as finances went. And I would
And-
also say that, yeah, I think that I learned a lot of things alongside them. I think that we kind of grew together.
Mm,
When I was a kid, my family went through bankruptcy, so we had to live with my grandparents for a while. And I think that, I actually just had this conversation with my dad the other day. I was telling him that I had realized that I had a lot of really false limiting beliefs surrounding money because of that situation. Like when you
yeah.
encounter a situation when you're a kid that makes you believe that money's not available to you, or if it is available, it's going to leave, or it's not
Yeah.
reliable, or whatever, then it's really hard as an adult to not feel the same way. And it has in the past made me really like stingy or controlling with money, like not, I don't want to let it go. Oh, please
Yeah.
don't leave.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I'd say that, as far as like what I know about finances and business, we learned together. My parents actually probably 4 years ago started their own business from home too.
Nice.
Yeah, they own a like an Amazon affiliate marketing type thing.
Okay.
So they still do it on the side of their regular jobs, but they also have kind of started going that route towards entrepreneurship, um, which is great. I wish them a lot of success with that. But yeah, other things I've learned online. YouTube has been my best friend for the last
Yes.
like 5 or 7 years.
Yes.
Um,
Information.
and Facebook and Google now have their own like educational
Yeah.
platforms too, which
Yeah.
can sometimes be a little tedious because you're like, this is 30 minutes of information I don't want to know. But when you get to the information that you do want to know, those can
Right.
be too.
It's kind of like college though, right? Like some of it's like, well, like I might not use this, but there's this stuff that I really need.
Right.
So
And at least I was exposed to it. And
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
my my life trajectory has changed a lot since college, but I definitely still can think of things that I go back to and I'm like, okay, now is the point I'm gonna use that.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah.
never know.
My husband is like, I hate the fact that you have so much debt. So to owe the government so much money now. But because I kind of gripe sometimes because I have a master's in psychology and a master's in mental health and wellness. And I'm not a psychologist. And I have a life coaching business and
Yeah,
I have a cleaning business. And so I'm like, I'm not using this. And he'll remind me like, first of all, you are using a lot of stuff you learned in college, even if you're not using these titles, you're
right.
using a lot of knowledge you gain, a lot of experience. So it, like it does still matter. But
Right.
you know,
Well, and even here on the podcast, I listened to a couple of your episodes before we connected, and I can even see you like using that knowledge and that education to help people even like in a different realm,
yeah.
which is really cool.
Yeah, well, thank you. I tried. That's one of the things with the podcast was I did want to focus at times on mental health because I do want to use my knowledge and stuff to help people. So to hear someone say that they like recognize that that's happening, that I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I did. I think it's really cool. I think that the generation that there's a little bit of an age difference between us, I know, but our generation and then the one coming up, I think is probably been the most open to discussions of mental health yet. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
I can remember like, growing up and we even, like I said, a couple times we were involved in a church environment. And so those environments, typically people are a little bit more, um, transparent, I guess,
yes,
in a
yeah,
lot of ways. You have small groups that you go and you talk about your issues and stuff like that. But even then it was, it wasn't ever a common conversation that I can remember having with my family. We never talked
yeah,
about mental health really until we
yeah.
were adults. So I think it's a good time to be alive when people are starting to work through their issues,
Right, right.
myself included. Yeah.
It's all over the place, which is
Yeah.
freaking fabulous. I love it. I love the fact that it's such a thing. And I used to be so anti-therapy until I went to school for psychology, and I was like,
Yeah.
I fucking love this.
Like
Like,
everyone needs therapy.
I have two kids in therapy. I'm in therapy. My husband's
Yeah.
in therapy. I love it. And if I could get my other kids, well, there's one. If I could get them in, I'd be doing
We all said
doing
you can
pretty
get a
good.
family discount that way.
But all I can do is just kind of keep influencing, just keep putting little seeds out there. But yeah, I love it. I love that it's such a thing. And um, so I want to talk about the kind of religious aspect of your journey too. I know we talked a little bit about this the other day. It was a
Yeah,
really, really good conversation. And I was
it
like,
was.
we could even make this a whole nother episode because it was
Sure,
great. So we'll just kind of touch on it for now and then
sure.
dive into it a little bit deeper at a later time. But one main thing that we talked about, religion over respect is kind of a big issue. It's a big
Yeah,
issue uh between in families. It's a big issue in society. It's the things that you and I have kind of discovered about religion over time. I don't know if I don't know really if for you your sexuality and your journey kind of came into play with your religious journey. Um, but for me, it kind of did because of the fact that I haven't received a lot of like ridicule from my family, but I married a man. So,
right,
like they don't really, I guess in their eyes, there's certain things they don't like. They don't like that I am bisexual, that I have been with women. But I
right,
guess it's kind of like, oh, okay, she married a man. So we
right.
won't bitch at her about that.
You don't have to deal with it
We'll
at
pre-
family
well, yeah,
gatherings,
yeah.
so
We'll
it's not a big
pretend.
deal.
Right,
Yeah,
right. But I've seen it a lot in other people. I've seen it in comments one of my family members has made. I've seen it in just the way people are treated in society in the name of religion and things like that. I have a good friend who kind of struggles a lot with her sexuality and just herself as a person because of religion. And I'm not in any way, saying that religion is bad or, whatever. but it can, as a lot of us know, it can cause issues
Yeah.
within the family, because if you have this certain religion that believes you should or shouldn't do this, and then you do, and there's a problem.
Right.
For me, it's kind of like it's interpretation, right? So it's like
Right.
you take this one piece and you're like, okay, well, this is what this says, and this is what it means. I'm not even going to go fully into it, but first of all, you're not even studying it right, but whatever.
Right.
And you're using it completely opposite of how you're supposed to be using it.
Right. And out of context. Both.
Completely,
Yeah, both.
completely in both aspects. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, tell me a little bit about your journey with your family and religion and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting that you mentioned for you that your journey through religion and also through your bisexual, like that part of you, that they went together, because mine actually went very separate.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I would say that I didn't even allow myself to consider who I really was until I turned away from religion.
Okay.
So it was very separate for me.
I get that though. I do get that.
Yeah, where I went to school, it was a very what's the way to say this? There was a lot of shame being put on people, and that was kind of just the overwhelming feeling that you got being in that place. And so after that experience, I would say that, I went through some religious trauma there as well as in my childhood. And so I think I just reached a certain point where I was like, you know what? I'm done. I can't handle y'all anymore. I need to focus on myself. And so I did. And so, my that journey of finding myself and how I identify and who I wanted to be and grow into happened very separate from religion. And I think only like in the last year have they really started to come back together, to the point where I'm starting to realize that they can coexist, that it doesn't have to be separate. But I can remember when I was in high school, there was the church we went to, the pastor was doing a sermon on gay marriage and the church's stance on gay marriage and that type of thing. Um, and I think they named the sermon something unbelievably cheesy, like the elephant in the room, or
What?
which to like a questioning kid who had not a lot of self-confidence, you know,
Right.
was a little bit like alarming. But but they were doing this sermon, and I can remember the pastor saying something to the effect of, you know as a Christian, it is our responsibility to confront our brothers and sisters in Christ about their wrongdoings. And he was basically portraying that action as an act of love. If you love someone, you should confront them. If you love someone, you should have a conversation about it.
I've heard that. Yeah.
And I think that my parents took that literally, but maybe to an extreme. I also think, there were a lot of faults on my part too, that kind of came around my coming out. I had been in a relationship with another woman for like a year and a half before I came out, so that was hurtful to them. I think just to be kept in the dark for so long. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of the things that happened between us could have been better if we both had approached things a little differently, from both parties. But
I think it
yeah,
was your first time in that situation though, you know?
right. Yeah, it was not a time that I'd ever like to go back to, but I learned a lot from it and I grew. So, after I came out, my parents and I had hours and hours and hours worth of conversations about my identity and God's view on my identity and my relationship with women. And, did we fail as parents? Is this our fault? Lots of tears were involved. And it was, and, kind of for the for 2 years really after I came out, I felt very shameful around my family. And for me, I was actually getting, texts and emails and calls from outside family members too,
Really?
shaming shaming me. I think unintentionally, looking back, I think they were just hurting and lashing out, but what they were doing was trying to make me feel bad about who I was because of the way that it reflected back on my family.
Yeah.
What are we going to say to our friends? What are we going to say to our, whatever? Which to me, I'm like, I don't give a fuck what you say to your friends. Like, just I am what I am. Tell them that you have a gay daughter and she lives in Savannah and be done.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
so at one point I finally had to sit down with my parents and have the conversation of, I don't I don't need you or expect you to agree with the way that I live my life or my decisions. I don't need that. But what I do need is for you to respect me enough to let it go, at least sometimes. you know, we don't
yeah.
need to have the conversation over every family dinner. We don't need to
Right,
talk about it every time we see each other. I just, at some point, if you want to be involved with each other's lives, like at some point, I just need you to let it go and accept that it is what it is.
right, right. It's part of who you are, but it shouldn't be the only thing people pay attention
Right,
to.
right.
And that's one reason that when I interview people about certain things, like I ask other questions. I don't want to just focus on the one thing that, like people might look at you whatever way for. Like there's so much more to Morgan, and that's what I want everyone to get to know too. You know what I mean? Um, excuse me. But
You're
yeah,
fine.
because yeah, like I said, like there's so much more to people than just their
Yeah,
sexuality or just their race or just, the thing that stands out to people who disagree with it.
yeah. Yeah, I think for my family, it was a real it was a real shock to their system, I think, just because, I growing up, I was just like the perfect kid, man. Like I didn't do anything wrong
Yeah.
that they knew about anyway. I was very well mannered and well respected within our community and my community. And I was kind of on this trajectory to be a daughter that they really wanted or something
Yeah.
that they really wanted for my life. So I think also just, knowing that my life was and is going to look differently than what they expected probably did cause sadness. And that's something that I had trouble grappling with for a while because I so badly wanted them to accept me and to change their mind.
Hmm.
And I think at some point I just had to realize, like, they're grieving the Morgan that is never going to exist, and they're allowed to do that. If that's what they need, then let them do that. But also at the same time standing up for myself and saying this is who I am and I'm not going to be ashamed of it any longer.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that. I try to be open minded and accepting, with my kids. I had one kid came to me who just so very casually, just because this is just how they are. And it's like, hey mom, by the way, I'm bisexual. And I was like, cool.
Yeah.
and, and they later came back and were like, I don't really think I am. All right, cool. I mean, like
Right.
this person hasn't like had a lot of partners, if really any. So I get like, you're exploring yourself.
Right.
Fine. Just whether it's a man, whether it's a woman, just be safe. That's what I care about. And then I had another we were in the car and I could tell that she was nervous about something. And, you know, at this point, how old were they? They were still like older teens and very young teen and preteen age.
Mm.
The kids and then the little one. And she was very she's still a young teen. She maybe like it
She was
just
even
recently became a teenager, maybe kind of right at preteen teenage. And we're in the car and she looks nervous about something. But I hadn't had any conversation with them about sexuality because as far as myself, because it hadn't really come up. I mean, I've been with my
sure.
fiance, I've been with their dad. And so she goes, I have to tell you something. I'm like, okay, tell me whatever it is. you know, and she's like, I think I'm bisexual. And she had this like, and I was like, me too. Yeah.
Let's high
She's like,
five.
what? You too? And I was like, yeah, girl.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling me. Cool. And if you're not, then cool, whatever you do, just be safe. That's,
Right.
I mean, I have we're not really going to go into that. I feel like conversations with kids and teenagers should be appropriate,
Right.
developmentally appropriate. So had it been like my 8-year-old come to me, my approach might have been differently because, well, you're 8 years old.
Great.
That
Yeah.
shouldn't really be your focus. And not to say that my teen and young adult, the sex is their focus, but the conversation is more about attraction, you know.
Right.
My 8-year-old could give a shit less about like, oh, so and so is cute, but that's probably the extent of it, right? Like he doesn't, you know.
Right.
But it your response, your approach, these things are important when you're having conversations with your children, your teenagers, your young adults, and they finally get the courage to come and have a conversation with you. Like how you react to them, it could change the whole trajectory of their future, their
Right.
mental health, if you respond in an unhealthy way to them.
Right.
Even if it's not something you agree with, are they being safe? Are they
Right.
coming to you and having conversations with you because they trust you? Great. Then who the fuck cares what your opinion is? Take care of that teenager or that young adult or whatever. Your personal opinion that can be later, and y'all can have that conversation.
Right.
But like, just support people. Like, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
supporting doesn't mean that you got to go be bisexual too. Like, no,
Yeah.
just support people and don't be a dick to them. Like,
Yeah. And
you know,
what I always want to say to parents who might have, children that haven't come out
I was
yet.
actually going to ask you that. I was going to ask you your advice on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that I would just love to say like it's okay to think before you respond. It's
Yeah.
okay to take the time to process that information before you give a response. I think, my parents and I have gotten closer in the last year, and it's been a lot of work on both sides. But I remember, there was a conversation where my mom apologized for the way that she did respond. It didn't mean that she agreed with me still, or that she wasn't,
Yeah.
morally against it or anything like that. Her beliefs hadn't changed, but she was able to recognize. So I just think that if that situation happens, and certainly, when I'm a parent, my partner and I do plan to have children, and I just think it's so important to remember that, it's better for you to respond later than to respond in a way that you don't mean, because you can't
I
take that
agree.
back.
I
You
agree.
know?
Yeah. Yep.
There are
Yep.
things that my parents have said that like I still think about routinely, and I know that there are things they wish they could take back, and it's the same for all of us. I've said things
Yeah.
too and about other people that I'm like, oh, I wish I could take that back. That was such a dumb thing to say.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, just this idea that it's okay to think and to collect your thoughts before you reply, especially with something so formative like your identity, you know?
Yeah. And it is. It's a part of your identity. It's a part of who you are. And just like anything, if you said, oh, okay, this is my hobby, this is what interests me, this is what I want to do in the world, this is what I want to be in the future. Those things are important too.
Right.
It's just as important. It's all part of your identity. It's just as important as the other things. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I read I don't know if you've read any of Jen Sincero's books. She's the one who wrote You Are a Badass, the
I feel like
self-help
I've
book.
heard of that one.
Yeah,
Um,
she wrote this book called You Are a Badass, and it's a self-help book for people that don't want to admit they need help, I think is her tagline.
ah,
So she talks a lot about God and the universe and opening yourself up to new opportunities and all kind of stuff. It's a really great book. I read it almost every day, at least one chapter, just to refresh my memory.
yeah,
Um, but she says something in her book, that sex, religion, and oh, there was one other. I'll just say sex and religion since it applies to this
okay,
conversation. Sex and religion are two of the biggest points of contention in all of humanity. And she said, but how much better would it be if we could stop arguing because those things were intended to be the best parts of our life?
yeah,
Like those things are meant to be enjoyed and celebrated. And religion can have a place with
Mhm.
gay people. Gay people can have a place with religion. So I just think it's crazy. It kind of made me realize just how silly it is that like these two things, which could be providing so much joy and safety and purpose, are just used for like something to argue about so often.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So much so. Yes. Uh, yeah. I,
Yeah.
I, another thing that, kind of stood out when we were first kind of getting familiar with one another, conversating, was your connection with sexuality and religion, them separate, how they intertwine and things like that. And the fact that, yes, you can practice a religion, be involved in the church, and still be a part of this community.
Right.
Really, I think it's even more beautiful because that means that you're probably paying more attention to the actually intentions of the religion and
Right.
the meaning of the words rather than just the spewing the things that make points.
Right. I'll tell you, I know a lot of angry Christians, a lot of angry Christians, and I just think, I know a lot of angry Catholics too. I'm not saying this is exclusive to Christianity, but my point is that religion wasn't intended to cause misery. If anything, it was intended to cause hope and to provide purpose. And so for people to just let it turn into this thing that makes everybody so miserable, like, and for what purpose, you know?
Right. Right.
That's not what God wants. I don't think. I don't think that's what God wants. I think he wants us to be happy and free.
Right.
And so it's just wild that people focus on the negative parts of it so often, so much
Yeah.
more than they need to.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh I stopped going to a certain church. I was going to this church for a while. I was very involved in it, very involved in it. I stopped going. I didn't go for a little while just because like moving and things like that. And then so I was gone for a little while and then I finally went back and I kid you not, I asked my mom, I was like, does he talk about this when I'm not here? Because every single time I went, he's shouting about the gays, the gays. And I'm like, what the fuck is that?
Right.
Is this just because I'm here? Because it
Right.
literally
He
doesn't
saw you
seem to
walk
happen
in and
anymore.
decided.
And I like I didn't even tell you I was coming. So
Right.
like, did you change your whole sermon just to
Right. I
get this
didn't
message out
RSVP
to me?
even.
Right. I did not. So I don't know. I was like, what? And then so of course I couldn't let my kids go there anymore because that's
Right.
not the message I want to teach my children.
Right.
Like and you have a few gay, not just bi, not like a few gay members of your
Right.
congregation. And then I found out, and I'm not going to put, I've talked about this before, and I'm not going to put out the name of the place or anything like that. But then I found out that these three people, these three, I guess not members, weren't allowed to be members.
Hmm.
Like not even allowed to be members of the church, but they were there faithfully. And I was like, what kind of twisted,
Right.
like,
What kind of bullshit is that?
yeah, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make me want to be here. That
No.
seems ridiculous to me. And I think a lot of people have left over this. A lot of people kind of like between my age and my oldest son's age have left over time because it's just like, what are we doing here? Like,
Yeah,
it,
I
yeah,
what I hear from a lot of people in the LGBTQ plus community that have experience with religion and with the church, um, what I hear a lot is that, one on one, the church or the church members are really accepting, but in public they denounce them
mm,
entirely. A
really,
great example of this was actually on the Hillsong documentary that was on Hulu recently.
yeah. I have to
They
watch
had
it because I keep hearing about it.
It's very good. I will say it gets pretty heavy. I tried to watch it with my partner Nicole, and she grew up Catholic. It was a little heavy for her, just as
Oh,
far as
okay.
like the speaking in tongues and the falling under the power of the spirit. The more like I can't think of the word, but the
I've
more
yeah,
expressive forms
yeah.
of,
I went
so
to a
that
camp as a teen one time and they were doing that and I was doing it too because like that's what we were
yeah.
supposed to do.
Oh, I know. I can remember the first fire tunnel I ever experienced. It was terrifying. I hope never to go through one again. Um, but yeah, a great example of that is in the Hillsong documentary. They had a gay man who was a member of the church in New York, and he was the director of the choir. He was singing on stage. But he was also very open. You know, he never denied the fact that he was gay, and he had a boyfriend that came with him to church. So he was very out, and he says on the documentary that he got an opportunity to go on Survivor, the show, and so he went to the lead pastor and he said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm going on Survivor and I plan on being very transparent about who I am. If they ask me if I go to church, I'm going to say you guys, I'm going to use your name. Like, is that okay?"
Mm.
Basically.
Yeah.
And so the pastor replied and was like, "Yeah, man, speak your truth, say whatever you got to say. We support you." And this guy, of course, was ecstatic because what other church?
Yeah. Right. Right.
And so he went on Survivor and he came back. And then he said almost immediately after he came back, this pastor of the New York church and then Brian Houston, who's the head of Hillsong International, they went on a TV show together and said, "Well, we believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman. We denounce that, being gay is acceptable. And we don't have any serving members of our church that are of the LGBTQ community."
Excuse me. Come again?
Right.
Because
And
that's
so
a
this
lot.
guy was like, and so basically he went back to the church and he was not welcomed to serve any longer because they'd made that statement. Um, and I find that happens a lot. When I was growing up, it was a lot of fire and brimstone. You're going to hell, that type of like aggressive preaching.
Yep.
I find that a lot of churches nowadays and in the last 10 years are trying to be more accepting, at least publicly, so that they're culturally relevant.
Yeah.
I do worry though that a lot of times there are places that are appearing to be something other than what they actually are, like in the case of Hillsong,
Right. Right.
accepting
Right.
one, but not really. That's not how you really feel or believe.
Right. Because how do you treat your actual members when they're
Right.
there and serving for you? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so I think that's something that, is concerning as a gay woman. And I do think it's hard too, like just to find places where you feel accepted, religious places anyway, and then also to wonder, if I do find a place, is it real? Do they really feel that way, or is that
Yeah.
going to change the second that I open my mouth?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a concern. Absolutely. It's something that I like to ask questions. I like to talk to people. I like to ask questions. I'll ask questions. So we're currently moving. We're buying a house in another city, and I go and I'm getting to know places in that city,
Sure.
and I'm enrolling my one of my kids into a private Christian school. So of course, one of the questions I asked the lady, I was like, "Hey, I have to ask you these questions because this is my child's future.
Right.
What is your professional representing the school, not your personal? What is your representing the school stance or response on homosexuality, the LGBTQ plus community, etc. as a school? Because I don't want your personal opinion because, you know, uh, but I also want to know that you're not going to be telling my kids, teaching them your personal opinion too. So that's another question I had. How do you guys go about teaching certain things if they are not of the biblical principles in the way that you display them? And the response that she gave, absolutely loved it. She said, we are a Christian school. So we do believe that a man and a woman marry and, blah, blah, blah. She said, but we don't treat people differently if they don't fit those principles. And we're not going to not let someone come to the school. She said, I wouldn't want two women making out, just like I wouldn't want a man and a woman making out on the school
Right.
property in front of the children.
Right.
So,
The
you know,
boundaries still apply. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And that was her point. She was like, I don't care who it is. You have to be appropriate. And that's that.
Right. Which is
But
fair. Totally fair.
yeah, that's what I said. I was like, that, yeah, that's fair. I gotcha. You know, but I need to know these things
Yeah.
because I have children, teens, young adults, even who are going to be influenced by the behavior of the people around them. And I have to ask questions. Sometimes my kids or my husband might be like, oh, God, why is she asking these questions? Because this is my kid's future. I need to
Right.
know
You're
that
like,
if
oh,
I'm
here's
not,
another one.
here's another one.
Right. Which is your
But like,
prerogative and what you should do as a parent. Yeah. I mean, that's healthy.
yeah, yeah.
It does bring up an interesting point though, too.
Mhm.
We were talking about the respect thing as far as like my relationship with my parents went and other people that have come out to maybe their religious parents as well.
Yeah.
I do think that sometimes, at least for me, it was hard to understand the fact that our respect for each other had to go the same way. I think for a long time I just felt like, well, I'm the one coming out, so I'm clearly the adult here. I can, whatever. And so, but my partner and I are going to go to family Thanksgiving and we're going to go to Christmas, but we're probably not going to be as physically intimate as we maybe otherwise would be for to respect my family, to not make them uncomfortable. I think you have to be really careful with that though, because of course you don't want to you don't want to hide parts of who you are, but I do think that there's something to be said for respecting the comfort level of those around you if it's somebody that you care about too.
Yeah, and you make a good point, and in conversation too, because having conversations with my mother, she saw something. It was something on Facebook. I'd never had this conversation with my mom because I knew how she felt. I feel like if I would have brought home a female partner, she would have been like, I don't agree with this, but I don't think she would have she never would have stopped talking to me or anything crazy
Right.
like that. Um, but I had to learn how to have respectful conversation with her and understand that okay, she's going to have a different perspective, she has a different belief system,
Right.
but she's not being mean to me about it.
Right.
And so just because my opinion doesn't agree with hers doesn't mean that I need to be mean to her either.
Right. And I think that's something that is really easy to want to do for for people that have been in that position. I think it's really easy to want to be like vindictive almost, like, well,
We're
you
just
hurt
instantly
me.
defensive because I know you don't agree, or,
Right. And you know what? In defense of our community, we do have every right to be easily defensive because there are a lot of people attacking us right now. There are a lot of people saying gross things about the gays. So, but yeah, it's like, even in simple things, we might be at a family gathering and she might come over and kiss my cheek or rub my shoulder or whatever, but we're probably not going to be like all over each other on the couch. Um,
right.
and part of that's just human decency, but I do think
Right.
there's something said for like if you're asking for respect from other people to make sure that you're giving that back to them as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
Which is common courtesy, but we don't actually see it a lot in our society, so maybe it's not that common.
Should be a common courtesy.
Yeah.
But if it all just went both ways, the world would be a little bit more tolerable.
Yeah, right. We wouldn't have nearly as much conflict, probably.
Right, right, right. Here's the hoping, right?
One day. I hope before I die I get to see it.
Right, right. Well, I have to go feed people now. So
Yeah, no worries.
I I I feel like we covered a lot today.
Yeah, maybe more than we meant to.
I know.
Sorry about that.
Don't be sorry.
Once I get going, I'm just like, okay, just stop.
I could, let's see, we got about an hour. I could break it into two. I may just
That's
leave it
true.
as one. And then, I would love for you to be a return guest. We
Sure.
don't have to talk about relationships every time. There's
Right.
so much more to and so we can talk about different stuff each time. But I do appreciate you having these conversations with me this time because of because I did want to focus on these things with it being Pride Month. Um, people can get to know you and they can learn a little bit more about your journey and get some helpful advice from someone who has been through these certain things.
Yeah,
And they can use it in situations that may arise for them if they, haven't come out yet, or they have and they're struggling even maybe with the two-way respect thing.
right.
You know, and if that is you, if you are someone who is struggling with your relationships because of sexuality or struggling with yourself because of it, respect is important, communication is important. I hope that you don't feel any less than because someone makes you feel different than them. You've got allies here, you know, but I really appreciate you coming on, and I can't wait to chat with you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a good month to speak out about who you are. I think it's really easy in today's society to feel like, you don't want to ruffle any feathers or stir the water or create conflict or,
Yeah,
we all want to have positivity in our lives, and sometimes that stuff attracts negativity, which can be disheartening. But this, of all months, is the
mm,
month to speak out.
yeah,
And especially with all going on in the world right now, it is important for people to know that they're not alone.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
So thanks for having me.
You're welcome. All right, well, it's like I thought I hung up on you.
Bye
All
bye.
right. All right, have a good one.
Yeah, you too. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye.